This is the MFG Monkey Podcast. We sit down with leaders and innovators in the industry to talk about manufacturing, business, and the stories behind their successes. I'm your host, Dustin McMillan, owner and founder of McMillan Co. David Altemir has over 30 years of professional management experience in engineering, R&D, manufacturing, supply chains, and enterprise IT. His diverse experience has spanned aircraft, UAVs, rotorcraft, spacecraft, medical devices, contract manufacturing, consumer products, food manufacturing, and manufactured homes at nearly all levels of functional areas. After his early NASA engineering experience, Mr. Altemir helped manufacturing companies, large and small, meet growing customer demand with on-time delivery and high quality. His career has been marked by developing and implementing numerous transformational improvements. Wow, we are going to have fun today. Mr. Altemir holds a Bachelor's of Mechanical Engineering from the University of Texas at Austin, Master's of Materials Science from Rice University, and an MBA from Massachusetts Institution of Technology. He is also certified Lean Six Sigma Sensei and the author of Lean MRP, establishing a manufacturing pull system from shop floor execution using ERPs and APS. Wow, that's a lot. We're going to have fun. Welcome, Mr. Altemir.
Thank you so much for joining me from Texas. This is the first podcast I've done since 2021, and you're the perfect person to have on our first one in such a long time.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So the thing that stuck out to me that there's a lot of things I didn't know about you. We met for a short time, and you visited our warehouse in Ohio a couple months ago, and I've just been following you on LinkedIn and thought you would have a lot to offer the audience and things. So definitely thank you. The NASA thing, reading that. So tell us a little bit about your experience at NASA. That's always fun.
Well, I was there for 10 years, so I did a little bit of everything. I started out in the R&D area and did advanced programs, did lunar soil research, trying to use microwaves to make bricks out of lunar soil so we could have a lunar colony. I did trajectory analysis on the Titan IV launch vehicle to insert space station modules into orbit. Was a project manager for the X-38 spacecraft fuselage, the composite fuselage. It was the first all-composite fuselage of a spacecraft ever.
Wow!
So I did lots of different things there.
That's incredible. What so you're there for 10 years, and did you jump right into owning your own company, or tell us a little bit about that?
No. I was very researchy at the time in material science, and I was in the materials engineering group. And at the time, the materials engineering group had been merged with the manufacturing division, and we got pulled out of the structures and mechanics division, they called it. And then the materials people went to the manufacturing group, and we were just like going, why are you doing this? Manufacturing, what are you talking about? And we all learned, and I, including me, that manufacturing is really cool. So yeah. I've been in manufacturing ever since. And after NASA, I went into, I did commercial aerospace for many years. And then eventually medical devices for a couple of years too, orthopedic implants and things like that. And then consulting.
Oh, wow.
Consulting, we only been consulting 7 years ago, I started 7 years ago. So I wasn't born a consultant. I don't particularly care for consultants, actually. If you had told me I was going to be a consultant, I would have thrown you out of the window. But hey, here we are, and I like it. Actually, it's rewarding.
Yeah. No, I have some friends that are mechanical engineers that I think if I said, hey, why don't you start a consulting company? what the hell are you talking about? No, I'm not doing that. So
Yeah.
I can appreciate that for sure. But I can tell that you definitely enjoy it now. I mean, just meeting with you, your passion, and who was the gentleman that came with you?
That was Rick Emerson. He's
That's right.
our
That's right.
warehouse consultant.
Yeah, he was a great guy too. So mechanical engineering into consulting, and you do so much on LinkedIn, which we call that sales, which is a 4-letter word to any engineer, right?
That's right. I never would have thought I would have been in sales, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, your videos are great. I mean, there's a lot of great content on your LinkedIn, so we'll make sure that we post that with, everything else that we post in your bio. What was your favorite stretch? Was it the study or the manufacturing or now the consulting?
What was? Oh, I see. Boy, that's a good question. I really enjoyed it all. I don't. I'd be loath to try and put one above the other.
Yeah.
Tell you what, the consulting's been interesting because I've seen so much different kinds of things.
Sure.
So maybe in that regard, it's definitely been interesting.
Yeah.
But working in aircraft and aerospace and medical devices has been really, really great.
Yeah. With your manufacturing experience at NASA, what was your favorite part about that?
The X-38 was the first major manufacturing effort that I was involved in, and what was really great about that is, I was at Johnson Space Center, and we had not, or they had not built anything out of composites before. And so not only was the design of the fuselage, the composite fuselage, brand new and from scratch, um, we also had to develop the facilities and do all of the material testing and develop all the material allowables and stress analysis and the tooling. We had to design the tooling. So it was like the whole enchilada, and there was basically two of us who led that, and it was great.
So with those experiences, did that drive what you guys, I guess, what your expertise is now with your consulting with on-time performance and how to measure it, or did that come later once you got into consulting?
It came. No, it didn't. It came right after NASA. I worked for a company called Aurora Flight Sciences, which is now a branch of Boeing, and we built the composite fuselage for the Global Hawk UAV.
Okay.
And I got there right at the point in time where they were transitioning from the RQ-4A Global Hawk to the RQ-4B. It was the new model that was much bigger, and it had to be retooled. And it was the whole aircraft, the fuselage, the whole aerostructure. So it was 10 levels of bomb deep, 10 bomb levels deep, hundreds of parts. So there was a very acute need for coordination and control and scheduling, and that's where I really cut my teeth on production scheduling and finite capacity scheduling. And the program the whole operation was really stretched. I mean, we were a relatively small second-tier supplier to Northrop Grumman, who was the prime. And the other folks that were our colleagues or our counterparts in the second tier were companies like ATK, Alliance Tech Systems, and Raytheon and L3 Communications. These are multi-billion-dollar companies. And then little Aurora was doing the composite fuselage. And at that time, the Global Hawk went into war. We flew the first 8 prototypes in Afghanistan, and it was just performed stupendously, and they couldn't get enough. So there was a lot of pressure, and the program was really falling behind and was not operationally, we were super, super stretched, and the elastic was breaking, and so it was a turnaround project, and so that was very informative in terms of on-time performance and all of the foundational elements that lead to on-time performance. Because if you're on time, it means you're doing a lot of things right, and
Sure.
so it was basically wall-to-wall, end-to-end transformation of the entire operation and program.
With on-time performance comes on-time purchasing, which I know that that's one of your guys' specialties is teaching manufacturers how to, the importance of on-time purchasing. Because if your raw goods aren't in the building, you're automatically late, right?
Yeah, yeah. On-time performance, on-time purchasing and manufacturing is kind of our the keystone of our consulting business.
Okay. And what kind of firms are you currently working with your consulting business?
Well, they're all manufacturers. There are just a few exceptions. We have worked with some industrial service providers, but it's a manufacturing consultancy, and it runs the gamut. We have aerospace experience. One of our consultants was a president of a Caterpillar division and did industrial equipment. We've had consulting clients that are industrial equipment, food manufacturing, paper products, genetic engineering equipment, modular homes, food manufacturing, just a little bit of everything. Anything that's discrete. I think the areas that we haven't done and I think we'd probably shy away from would be things like pharmaceuticals and like large scale chemicals, refineries, continuous processing. But anything that's discrete, we're good for.
That's great. Do you have a favorite industry that you've worked in while consulting? Is there one that you just have more passion for than all the others?
Well, I like industrial equipment, but
yeah,
they're all very interesting. I mean, I've had terrific fun with food manufacturers, and we've done some medical device companies too. That's it's interesting because of the regulatory compliance issues. There's other bells and whistles that you've got to deal with there. So we even worked with someone that made toilet paper and paper towels, and that was really interesting. So that's the allure of it, is that these industries that I didn't know anything about and wouldn't have imagined what was going on in these companies, but there are challenges everywhere.
Yeah, the food industry really intrigues me. I really didn't have any experience in the food industry at all until this year. And one of the guys in my Visage group, they own a vegetable and fruit manufacturing company. So they're taking vegetables and fruits and they're packaging them and they're sending them to schools, and it's the process is just mind blowing to me, how they take celery and they get it into a little package and send it out to schools. So their business is really involved in the health of our children throughout the United States. So it was awesome to see just that process. It's like, how are you taking all these carrots and getting them into a little package? And it's, a combination between automation and a lot of hands, a lot of people, a lot of knives flying around. And then the paper industry, that was my first experience in manufacturing. As I worked for a wet felt paper manufacturer. So we made the felts on the wet end of the press. So it was pretty mind blowing to see, especially a tissue company, right? How fast those presses are running. And our presses are slow compared to what some other countries are running. But pretty interesting stuff.
Yep.
And you have a lot of paper mills down in your area too, don't you?
Boy, we had our paper clients were in like Alabama and Wisconsin and Quebec. So I haven't worked with any. I haven't worked with any around here. I'm sure they're around, but I haven't seen them.
I got you. Very good. What is on-time performance, and how do you measure it? Walk us through that.
Well, of course, yeah, on-time performance just simply means being able to ship a product out on time.
Mhm.
Um, but with in some in some environments where there's a lot of complexity, because the bombs are large or there's lots of manufacturing steps, the routings are long, perhaps. Um, it's much more complex. I mean, if you're trying to build an aircraft that takes 7 or 8 months to put together, uh, you need an early warning system for on-time performance, because you just can't wait until your nose is right up to the customer order due date to see whether you're on time or not. So you really need to deconstruct on-time performance. And so, yeah, measuring on-time shipments is kind of the bottom line measure.
Mhm.
But in terms of a day-to-day tactical type of metric, the way I would measure on-time performance is to deconstruct that a little bit, working back from the customer order. So to ship on time, you have to complete work orders on time, and
Mhm.
to complete work orders on time, you have to complete all of the manufacturing operations on time. And to do that, you have to start them on time. But to start them on time, you have to adhere to schedule priorities that make sense. And that
Mhm.
that there is kind of the key to on-time performance. And so, we've developed metrics and implemented metrics where we measure that health every every milestone along the way in building a large product or small product, because we want to deconstruct and look at on-time performance, not just at the end item deliverable, but for every work center and every operation, so that we can then have some data that will tell us, well, this is where the bottlenecks are, this is where things are going awry.
So, are you guys helping people implement ERPs, or are you helping improve the ERPs that are already in process?
Yes and yes. We do
Okay.
implementations, we do selections, implementations, but a lot, and I would say most of what we do is what I would call optimizations of existing systems,
Okay.
where they have performance issues in the business, and maybe that's what's driving them to come to us, or they know full well that they're not utilizing the system fully, or taking it full advantage of it. And so, ERP optimization would be kind of the term that we use for that kind of work.
Do you have a favorite one? Is there one that if somebody doesn't have an ERP system, you're like, this is your go-to. This is my favorite one. It's easy to operate.
Well, listen. It depends. It depends on the scale and the size of the businesses. Some systems are terrific, but they require a lot of care and feeding because they're complex enterprise level systems.
Hmm.
For multinational conglomerates. So
Sure.
I wouldn't want to wish that on a small business, but it's a terrific system.
Sure.
So it has to be appropriate. But even listen, all these all most all, and I would say virtually all, except weirdo systems. If it's a weirdo system, then it's not architected like most other ERP systems. If you look in the back tables, the architecture tends to be very similar from system to system. And
Hmm.
that's because over decades of ERP and MRP software um, evolution, best practices have kind of suggested how these systems need to work, and that's why our that's why we're system agnostic. We can work pretty much with any system. So, um, hey, I like Epicor. I like the scheduling functionality in Epicor, but there's lots of others that are nice too.
Hmm. If there's a small machine shop or um, sheet metal fabrication company or powder coating company that they might be doing $4 or $5 million a year, and they're not operating on a system at all. They're still operating off of a spreadsheet. What would be your go-to if one of those companies came to you and said, "Hey, we know that we're operating off of a spreadsheet and there's a lot of holes here, and we're probably 80% on time delivery." What would you suggest for those folks?
Yeah. Well, I would invite them to look at it. There's a system called MRP Easy, and we're a an authorized partner of their. We're a consulting partner, so we don't sell
Okay.
the software, make
Sure.
no money selling software,
Yeah.
but we've worked with it, and it's really good for small businesses. It
Yeah.
interfaces with QuickBooks Online. Um, and I got to tell you, it's a lot of bang per buck. That little system is really nice, and
Yeah.
it's easy to use, and it's very intuitive. And they did a really great job putting it together. They've added functionality over the years, so that's a good one. And it's an actual costing system and a hard
Hmm.
pegging system, which most are not. Most are standard costs. And for a
Okay.
machine shop that does custom work, or if it's a light bulb factory, you can deal with standard costing. But if you do any kind of custom work, or it's a startup and you don't know your unit cost, then you really need an actual costing system. And that's been MRP Easy's been the best one that I've found in that tier of ERP system for small businesses.
Okay, great. So with the costing, it has the ability to scan on and off at each work center and track all the labor costing and everything through
Yeah.
the entire process.
Yeah, it has a built-in MES screen, so you can do all
Okay.
your material and labor reporting. And yeah,
Okay. That's awesome. I'm sure, there it's interesting for me to go into so many small facilities and they don't have a system, or they have a system and
yeah,
they're kind of using it, but it's so clunky that nobody wants to use it, and certainly not not the folks on the floor.
right,
So
right.
yeah, that'll be that'll be good. Um, what do what do you typically see as the main drivers of performance as you evaluate on-time delivery or on-time purchasing?
Well, I'd say at a very fundamental level, there are two prerequisites that you have to have for on-time performance. One is you have to have a tolerable level of an acceptable level of production quality. Your quality defects have to be within, a tolerable range. If you have serious quality problems, then the whole operation is virtually unplannable and unschedulable, because everything's unplanned. So that has to be within bounds. Um, you have to have a a good modicum of capacity. If you are constantly trying to put 50 pounds of potatoes in a 30-pound bag, it just nothing's going to work. So
Right.
if you have the basics, which is good quality and capacity that's in the ballpark, um, then there are things you can do to drive on time performance. The things that are the main drivers are things like inventory accuracy, inventory planning, which is making sure that you have the right stuff at the right levels. Um, a lot of companies have a combination of shortages and overstock. The things that are high turning, they can't keep on the shelves. The things that are slow turning just start piling up, and then the accountant on the balance sheet in the aggregate sees all of this stuff accumulating over years and years, and it's high. But that's
Mm,
that's a planning problem. Doing purchasing where the requirements are not clearly known, that's another killer. In some businesses, if you don't have the right approach to production scheduling and production control, where you're actively managing the schedule, that's another killer. Um,
okay.
so things like that.
And I'm guessing, you know, bad data in, bad data out, right? So if people aren't, you know, marking off that they're using a widget of any kind, and the system says that you have 400 of them and you have four, and your
Yeah,
folks just aren't using the system, then you're never going to get ahead, right?
that's right. Yeah, yeah. Usually, if we were talking about inventory accuracy or poor
Hmm.
inventory accuracy, usually that is a people process thing. It's not a
Okay.
system thing, because I
Sure.
I mean, you'd have to show me an inventory management system that can't manage inventory because it's just in and out.
Right.
Pluses and minuses. So chances are is you're not managing the pluses and minuses correctly. And there can be, that it's usually people in process, but there could be some underlying data quality issues. Units of measure is a good one. It still remains to this day the best way I know to really hose up inventory is to have a poorly selected unit of measure.
Right.
So that goes into the category of bad data.
And, we were just talking about people complaining about the ERP systems. Is that part of the problem is people just don't know how to use it, or they don't use it and then they blame it on the ERP system that it's wrong?
Yeah. Well, that sure does happen a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. Nobody wants to take responsibility, right?
Well, I think it's I'm sure that's the case. Sometimes they just honestly don't know what the issue is, and they just think that the system is the problem. I mean, we've had clients come to us with wanting inventory improvements and to improve their accuracy, or actually, no. They come to us asking for us to help them select a new ERP system because the one they're using doesn't work and it doesn't keep inventory straight. And it most assuredly is not the situation.
Sure. Yeah, we had a customer like that too. It was a gas utility, and they had a fabrication shop, and they had no idea what they had in their entire shop. But they also had we were in there, and they had the wrong parts on the wrong shelf with the wrong coating, and they had no idea what they had. So we spent months just going through and reorganizing and re-tagging everything, and then straightening up their system, their warehouse management system. And they were just buying and buying and buying stuff that they already had, in their shop. And it was really wild that that was going on. And there were certainly people that weren't happy because there were people that they found that just weren't, they had systems in place, but they just weren't using them.
Yeah. Well, if your buyer is exporting data out of ERP into Excel to massage it and figure out what he wants to buy, how much and when, then you got a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because your system should be triggering you when to buy, or should just be buying those things automatically if everyone's using the system, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, it's so much easier that way. It's just such a beautiful thing. And sometimes folks have just never worked in an environment like that where it worked. I mean, I've come across buyers who don't feel comfortable using MRP because, they've never, they've always done it this way, and they're all in Excel. And they always felt that it was their job to create the requirements, but it's not their job to create the requirements. It's the business's job to generate requirements based on demand in a good way, and so that the buyer can execute.
So that's an interesting point. So you've run across buyers that feel like they're almost cheating by using a system because they feel that it's their personal responsibility to physically keep track of inventory.
Well, I wouldn't say no. It's their job to build and develop the purchasing requirements.
Okay.
And by the same token, there are production schedulers they feel it's their job to constantly manage the schedule, and so these are make work projects. They're not. They are burning hours, dollars, and calories to no useful end, because there's just there are better ways to do this that will make the entire supply chain work harmoniously with itself when everyone is tied into the common data bus, and then the requirements just come out very beautifully, and it tells you what to buy, how much, and when, and then if you execute accordingly, guess what? You won't have any shortages, and you'll be on time.
Sure. Are you seeing many companies work with outside warehousing companies to help either space issues or help them with their on-time delivery as far as managing inventory for them, and then they're pulling from a warehouse. It seems like you see like Hondas or Toyotas do that, where they do a lot of kitting, and they want that kit labeled a certain way to go on the production line, and they don't do those things in house. They have a third party company that'll do those kits for them.
Yeah, well, I think the bigger companies do that. They have a 3PL. I know Peterbilt has a plant up the road here, and their 3PL is right across the street, and they do exactly what you just said.
Okay.
I don't know. In fact, we just finished a big project there in Ohio with 3PLs. Most of the companies we work with don't. I mean, they're manufacturing businesses where they have the factory and the warehouse and the same piece of land, and
sure.
And it's all self-contained, but depends on the scale, really.
Sure. With different lean manufacturing and fitting into your consulting practice, how all this goes hand in hand, right? If your ERP system is banging away properly, your manufacturing process is just more lean.
Yeah. Well, the thing with lean manufacturing is, that's the state of the art in manufacturing. Continuous improvement is lean manufacturing and Six Sigma, and I'm a Lean Six Sigma sensei, so I'm totally into that. We do lean projects at the shop floor and warehouse level, where we improve cycle times and efficiencies and labor efficiency and things like that. But I would say that the most hard-hitting projects that we have, where that are really transformational, are lean improvements at a higher level, because usually it's most often it's not an inefficiency of a manufacturing process. It's not like they're not welding fast enough or they're not cutting metal fast enough. It's the timeliness and availability of raw materials, the supplier performance and managing them. It's coordinating sub-assemblies and making sure all the parts are there on time so that you don't have half-built assemblies lying around. It's all of these front office things that are kind of at a higher level that are really governing the efficiency of the entire operation, and those are the kinds of lean improvements that that I enjoy most, because they're the most fruitful. And usually you can just put your screwdriver in the set screw and turn it a quarter turn, and things start to work a lot better together. This goes back to ERP optimization, but it can also just be procedural or training issues. It doesn't have to be system related. It could be anything. And things start to fall in place. And we have some great case studies where we've made on-time improvements, from 40 to 95, 98% or 100%. And that's pretty meaningful usually.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just customer satisfaction and bottom dollar. I mean,
yeah.
If you're on time, your customer's happy and your accountant's happy usually. And
you're usually more profitable because overtime doesn't suck you dry, and all your indirect labor and trying to coordinate, and I've worked in some environments where the collective blood pressure was high. And manufacturing management can be a pressure cauldron.
Sure.
I remember my boss telling me that, the statistics show that manufacturing managers die of heart attacks more often. I don't know if that's true, but I wouldn't doubt it.
Wow. I have not heard that one, but I can imagine how much it just improved culture as well. I mean, if all the systems are running and everyone's happy and everyone's meeting goals and management's happy, the culture of the entire company would have to improve just by, turning that set screw a quarter of a turn. And, we've seen companies that the cultures, people are grumpy and they don't, they're they just hate their life sometimes.
Yeah.
And, with your point, it really would stem from just, the squeaky wheel gets to grease, where managers are yelling because this part is not on time or that part's not on time, and there's a deeper issue.
Yeah.
And just listening to what you're saying, it's usually a system-driven issue and not a labor issue. Jimmy's not, you're not late because Jimmy's not cutting something fast enough.
Yeah. Sometimes I wouldn't say it's not a system, a data, a people or process issue. It's a philosophical issue. And in those businesses that rely on a production schedule, the way they compose the project schedule, the production schedule, there are different ways to do it. And if you've got the wrong philosophy or the wrong idea of what a schedule is and what it's supposed to be and what role it plays in your business, then you can just spend endless hours turning the crank on a broken machine and not know it.
So would you say that that's the single most important thing with on-time performance is the philosophy, or what would you contribute that to?
Well, it is for make to order businesses, I would say generally, yeah, that's probably the single most. It can be any number of things. On-time performances could be lots of different things together. It's rarely just one thing, but I would say the single most important issue in on-time performance for a make-to-order business is really having the right conception of what a schedule is, what it means, what it's supposed to do, and how to manage it, so that the schedule doesn't turn into a chaos machine. Because after all, the purchasing people are connected to your production schedule, and as soon as your production schedule starts becoming flippy floppy or turns into an oscillator, then the the buyers and your suppliers are now working to a fuzzy schedule, and lead times get long and bad things happen. But that's a make to order business where the production schedule is very preeminent. In a make to stock type of business, I would say the thing that tends to go south most often is inventory planning, because you got to maintain finished goods stock. And if that protective wall of finished goods that is basically insulating your factory from customer demand, because you have that protective wall of finished goods inventory in the middle, so that when a customer order comes in, it hits the warehouse and your factory can just kind of replenish it very leisurely. But if your planning is off or not right, then holes will develop in that protective wall, and those customer orders will just fly. They'll bypass the warehouse altogether, and they'll land in the lap of the factory. And now you've got a bunch of hot orders, and now everyone's hair is on fire, and then it becomes a daily occurrence. So the red flag there, and this is an experiment you can do at home. You ask your material manager, hey, what method do we use for determining how much stock we should keep on hand? And 9.5 times out of 10, the answer will be, well, we keep 30 days on hand, or we try and keep at least 45 days, or whatever. It depends on the lead time of the product. It's a 14-day item, we try and keep for it. Well, that's just the wrong answer. Anything that's based on averages or just lead times, it's simple, it's easy, it's intuitive. You could concoct some kind of logic around it, but it would only be a half truth at best, because you're not accounting for all of the variability in customer demand and in your supplier performance, right? And we all know about COVID and what happened to supplier performance, and that'll never go away. There'll always be supplier performance issues. So all of that needs to be taken into account with inventory planning. By the way, when we do that, when we have a simulation model that we use to optimize inventory levels, we're almost always, and I got to tell you, it's just almost always. I would say always, except I can remember one case where they didn't have enough inventory, but almost always we're able to reduce inventory by 20 to 50% is generally. We had our record is 80% reduction.
Wow.
But 20 to 50 is just not uncommon. And at the same time, improving material availability, fill rates, service levels, the raw material or the product will be there at lower inventory levels. And it's because we've right-sized the inventory for every part in a very sophisticated way that takes into account the things that matter.
So how do you account for unknown sales cycle? So everyone has some data, some history, but if your sales cycle is unknown month to month, is your system or your philosophy it's obviously taking into account inventory levels and order levels, because we see that in our shop. And what we're doing is we may have last year in January, we did 2,000 of something. So automatically we plan to do 2,000 of whatever this January, but that may not be the case. And if it's more or less, then, those things get out of whack.
Right on. Well, there's no single magic solution to that. I mean, because this stuff is unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. So, I mean, the only three things that you have to rest on is historical demand and supply. So right. Historicals, seasonal behavior, if you want to take it to that level of precision, because that tends to be a fine level of precision, but that's a factor. So seasonality, historicals, and then you need something that, to extrapolate forward, you need to adjust it up or down by your forward-looking outlook. And that's where forecasting comes in. But the thing with forecasting, unless you're Procter and Gamble, Procter and Gamble, it's a consumer product. They're selling soap. People shower and wash their hands as much as they shower and wash their hands. And so it's pretty reliable. Forecasting there really boils down to what new marketing channels are coming online, or are we doing, some promotion here, or is it new branding, whatever's going on, marketing or sales wise. With other businesses, and I think back on medical devices, where we'd have orthopedic braces, where you'd have a left brace or a right brace, and of course you'd have 8 sizes, one for kids, one for and then one for giant people. You'd have all these sizes. It's like shoes, right. And the demand for any one SKU is very episodic. It's not like soap at all. But that's where that statistical behavior and that historical analysis can really, you can use it, because it'll tell you if you want to keep it on hand 99% of the time or 100% of the time, this is the level. And it's usually a level that's much lower than you were keeping previously. So if that's the case, if you say it's unknowable, it may be either because your history isn't well understood, or you simply don't know what the future will bring from the market side. And, I just rely on salespeople to give insights on the market side. But one thing you can't do is let the forecast be a market timing experiment. Like the stock market, market timing doesn't work. And I've seen forecasts. I've seen Fortune 500 companies where they'll give you a part number, and here's my 12-month forecast, and they'll say we are expecting 200 units in March and 0 units in April and 700 in June. And I'm like going, how do you know that with so much precision on where these orders are going to drop in what monthly bucket? And invariably they give you an update of the forecast, which is completely different.
Sure.
And the forecast, and then God forbid that they start building to forecast, as a lot of companies do, because then you've tied an oscillator to another oscillator to another oscillator, and everything's hosed.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, so with inventory planning, you got those three things: a forward-looking forecast from sales that is sensible, is not, you're not trying to predict the future in a way that you can't, but you are mindful. It is informative with respect to what marketing channels are opening up, where this product is going to go obsolete, so it's going to go away. These kinds of structural, fundamental things that you really can have a handle on, that you can ask your salesperson and get a good answer, saying, "Oh, well, yeah, we're going to shut down that. We're not shipping to Denmark anymore, or we're going to open up Chile." Those things are known. But if you go to your sales team and you say, "Hey, how many units are we going to sell in July?" They'll give you a number, but they will not know.
Sure. And I think
that's junk data.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up COVID and inventory levels through COVID. I wonder, how many companies do you see right now that are sitting on warehouses of inventory of finished goods, because they got, they're especially the fitness industry, probably Peloton and Rogue and all these other companies that had something to do with the fitness industry. Their sales went bonkers, and they never saw it coming because people couldn't go to the gym. And now they're just so heavy on inventory. How do they work through that? That's a scary thing for some companies right now.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I do see that. I mean, most of the companies we deal with, a lot of our clients don't have finished goods. They ship, they make to order. But we certainly see that in finished goods and a lot in raw materials for sure. Yeah, it happens.
That might be an interesting challenge for you next, helping some of these companies that are sitting on just a mountain of inventory to get their processes in order and get rid of that inventory.
Well, the buzzword for that is SIOP.
What is it again?
SIOP, and there's two acronyms for that. It's SIOP or SONP. Same thing. It's sales, inventory, and operations planning. It's a word made up by consultants years ago, but it's a very formal process where a company will ask themselves, "Hey, what is demand? What is the demand outlook?" And they'll do demand planning, and they'll talk to their sales and marketing people to try and inform that demand planning, and then they'll use it to say, "Well, are we prepared? Are we going to turn down the throttle on production, or are we going to ramp up? Do we need capital equipment? Do we need to go and get a capital budget ramped up, or do we need to hire or fire?" I was at an aerospace company, and we implemented a SIOP process there, and this was in 2008 during the big downturn of the real estate bubble, and we saw it coming. And our SIOP process worked, and we removed $500 million of aircraft from our production schedules and ramped down. So it can happen. Of course, you're certainly not always clairvoyant, but but you're certainly wrong if you don't do that, because then you don't even try, and things just happen to you. And the warehouse just gets full of stuff, and you don't know how it happened.
Well, and as far as the vendors, that makes your relationship with your vendors and your partners so much better. If your projections are what they are, and you're giving out purchase orders because you need, a certain widget, and your purchase orders are incorrect, and then the year later you come back and you like, "Oh, we don't need that, those million widgets anymore," but your supplier bought material to make those million widgets, then you end up in a lawsuit because you have material for 1 million widgets but no sales for 1 million widgets, and the user doesn't want to take them. So
Yeah.
it is interesting how important all this stuff is, and I'm sure you've seen some wild things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you want to leave our listeners with one last thing, what would be your most important piece of advice for any company, small or large?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Well, I just to be clear, I'm an operations management consultant, so I can't say anything about sales or marketing,
Sure.
or financial planning or anything. But operationally, inventory management is something that is often it's not often, it's almost always not practiced correctly, and by that I mean the inventory planning part. Inventory control also has its problems, but inventory planning is, it's just one of those, top 5, top 10 red flags that, as I said before, if your rule of thumb is to have 30 days on hand, you're probably missing the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, and making it 45 may not be the right thing either.
Sure.
Yeah, so inventory, scheduling, the thing I would say there is actively managing the schedule sounds like a wonderful, delightful thing, a productive thing to do. It's to me, it's the root of all evil, because what you've done is you've created a chaos machine, and and in the effort to try and make the schedule accurate, whatever that means. You've created inadvertently a circular, a feedback loop in your operation, in your ERP system. Sometimes, literally, I mean, you could see it in. I've taken measurements, and it turns it into a random number generator. I mean, there was a large aerospace company where I took measurements in the time and frequency domain of date changes in the system, and they were uniformly distributed, which is to say their MRP system was a random number generator. And it's because they had the wrong idea on what a schedule is and how to use it and how to manage it. So yeah, inventory and scheduling, planning, those are the things that overarch any of the lean improvements that you can do at a very localized level, for a CNC process or an assembly process or things like that. Because whatever lean improvements you make in those local processes, they get completely overshadowed and wiped out by the inefficiencies that are happening in the front office via inventory planning, via scheduling, production control.
Well, what is your ideal size of company to work with?
Well, let me tell you, we work with with almost any. We do pre-revenue startups and multi-billion-dollar companies and everything in between. I got to tell you, anything between 20 to, I don't know, 200 million tends to be a sweet spot, because it's a small. They have resources. They have resources that can be brought to bear, but it's small enough that things still get done, and it's not political.
Sure.
Sure. So those tend to be the best outcomes. So yeah.
Good. Well, I really appreciate your time. I've learned a lot just talking to you, and I appreciate you coming on. And I know you're extremely busy, and hopefully everyone finds this interesting. We'll put everything in the bio, but if somebody wants to get a hold of you guys directly, how do they do that?
Well, go to altemirconsulting.com, and it will all unfold right before you.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thanks a million for inviting me, Dustin. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks everyone for joining us for this episode of MFG Monkey. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please email them to us at info@mfgmonkey.com.